Where's everyone going? Bingo?
In my past videos, I've talked about games that I grew up on, such as Prince of Persia and Ninja Gaiden. Another one on that list is Resident Evil 4. I got fond memories of taking turns on Mercenaries with my best friend in that game. So when RE4 was up for a remake, the discussion focused on whether a remake was necessary. It's RE4. It's like saying whether The Birds needs a remake. You could do it with modern effects and updated visuals, but why would you? Remaking a game is already hard, but remaking a game that's considered a classic is playing with fire.
Holy shit.
It's a lot easier to screw up a remake than it is to pull it off. Resident Evil 2's remake surprised us all back when it released in 2019 because of how closely it followed the events of the original, but the presentation and the writing had been tuned up to bring back the horror in the survival horror genre. Unfortunately, Resident Evil 3's remake didn't get as warm of a reception because there were too many things that were cut from the classic game, and the bonus content felt lacking. If Capcom ever intended to remake RE4, they had to knock it out of the park. And after playing it nonstop for the past 2 weeks, I'd say they were able to pull it off. It's the most faithful of the modern remakes in terms of preserving as much of the original set pieces and encounters, but it doesn't rest on RE4 Classic's laurels. Rooms have been shuffled around and merged together so that certain elements have been retained, but other parts have been excised. But as a testament to the remake's quality, those omissions don't feel like missing content. Well, most of them. This video isn't a full review of the Resident Evil 4 remake. It's me talking about my experiences after running through the game a few times. I'm gonna assume you've either played the original Resident Evil 4, the remake, or both.
Bit of advice, try using knives next time. Works better for close encounters.
Try using knives next time. Better for close encounters.
Not a bad move.
I'll make references to game mechanics, plot points, and level design from both versions. I'll also talk about the changes of the controls and story, so expect spoilers from here on out. But I'm not doing a deep dive into the plot or gameplay. I'm not even going to do the thing where I compare gameplay footage between versions. I'm still burnt out after my last videos, so we're taking it easy with this one. Call it a refractory period. I like how RE4 settles the question on how knives should work in the remakes. In RE2, they were part of a sub-weapon category along with grenades that Leon and Claire could use to break out of zombie grabs and avoid an injury. RE2 knives had durability, so every time you used them to carve up an enemy or to break their hold, you would use up the knife until it finally broke, and you had to get another one. In RE3, the knife has infinite durability, but can't be used to break out of grabs. You have to mash out of them and take chip damage during the struggle. RE4 made a compromise. All knives have durability, but when Leon's combat knife breaks, it stays in his inventory, it doesn't get discarded like kitchen or boot knives. You can take it to the merchant to repair it and improve its stats so that it can take more damage before chipping away. If an enemy grabs you, you can either mash X to break the grab while taking chip damage, or press R2 to stab the enemy with a knife at the cost of its durability. The other cool thing about knives in RE4 is that they let Leon parry enemy attacks. If you see an attack coming, you can press L1 to parry it. Something weird to point out is that if you go into the options, you can toggle a setting that lets you parry with R2 along with L1. I don't mind having multiple inputs to do the same attack, so I don't know why this had to be something you enable, unless Capcom was worried that it would confuse players. It's especially weird since sprinting has multiple inputs, but they're both enabled by default. You can press in left stick to sprint like any other action game, or press R1. I like having an actual button to press, so I stick with R1, but sometimes it gets screwed over because the quick turn action is to press back and R1 at the same time. I like to run from threats while keeping the camera trained on them, so I had to remap the quick turn command to avoid having the camera whip around 180 degrees and disorient me. You can crouch by pressing circle. It's handy for sneaking around combat areas before the enemy is aware of your presence. If you can get behind them, you can backstab Ganados, or even face stab them if they haven't been spooked. Stealth is pretty basic. You won't see vision cones or alert indicators over enemies' heads, but there are a few sections where you can avoid a full-on fight if you can kill everyone without getting spotted. However, some fights are meant to happen, and there will be enemies posted at choke points that guarantee you'll be spotted. With the inclusion of parries, combat in the remake is fundamentally the same as in Classic. You can shoot heads or legs to stun enemies, and then do follow-up attacks by getting close and pressing X. You can shoot incoming projectiles to deflect them, but you can also parry them by pressing L1 at the right time. My new game high is seeing an enemy huck a Molotov at me, and then parrying it so it harmlessly breaks next to me. I know I can use crouch to avoid enemy grabs, but I'm not big-brained enough to know how to incorporate that during combat. Almost all the weapons from Classic carried over, with some notable changes and a very notable absence. Incendiary grenades are gone. Ganados can still huck Molotovs and shoot flaming bolts, but Leon can't return the favor. I think it's meant to prevent players from cheesing the Torres Mendez fight, since all it took to stop him in Classic was 2 to 3 incendiaries. The Mine Thrower has been reworked to become the Bolt Thrower. It's meant to be a way to kill enemies silently, and its ammo is retrievable, so you don't have to worry about using up your bullets. You can attach mines to the tips of the bolts to make explosive traps for the enemies. I could see potential for this kind of weapon in a game that was more like RE2's and 3 style, but I prefer the tried and true method of walking up to an enemy and shotgunning their face off.
Hey, our guests would think we're rude. So much for service for this smile, huh?
The remake sticks close to the Classic script when it comes to weapon placement in the early game. You still find the pump shotgun and a frag grenade in a 2-story house during the village fight. But now you find the Red 9 in a chest in the middle of the lake, and the merchant sells a broken butterfly at the start of the castle, instead of being placed in a room with a hole above the door near the fountain. Consequently, this trivialized the first Gyarados fight for me. I like how the remake handles gun attachments. You can place attachments on guns by either selecting the gun or the attachment and toggling them. It's handy for rifles because you can swap out a regular scope with one that has thermal imaging, without spending too much time fiddling with your inventory. Speaking of which, I like how inventory management works in the remake. It still uses the attaché case for grid-based inventory, but now you can map weapons to shortcuts on the D-pad. Removes all that time pausing the game to swap out guns. I do find it weird that you can choose to stow guns into a separate storage screen with a typewriter if you don't plan on using that gun, but don't want to sell it off just yet. I feel like it betrays the premise of the attaché case. One of the more interesting reworks is how body armor functions in the game. Once you buy it, Leon will wear it for the rest of the campaign. When he gets hit, the armor loses some durability, and that takes away from the damage that goes to Leon's health. Like knives, you can repair body armor via the merchant. It's definitely an important upgrade once you get to the castle, because a single hit from those enemies will put you straight into the red if you don't have armor. The remake also revamps the treasure system. Instead of finding specific gems for specific treasures, some treasures will have square or circular slots. You can place whatever gems you find in the game into those slots, and you'll get multipliers that affect the treasure's value based on what gems you've placed. The game even shows that the price changes when you swap out gems. Crafting carried over from RE2 and 3. You need gunpowder and materials to craft ammo or grenades. It's actually not that bad, as enemies still drop ammo and Beset does when they're killed. It gives you options on whether you want to make more ammo for a specific gun, or if you need more flashbangs. Besides buying items and upgrading or repairing your kit, you can also complete side quests and turn them into the merchant. Side quests can range from shooting a number of blue targets in a given area, killing a number of rats or snakes, or hunting more powerful versions of enemies. When you complete a side quest, the merchant rewards you with spinels, which are trash loot in Classic. Now they're an alternate currency you can use to buy unique items and attachments. All the enemies from Classic are back, and some have been reworked to have new roles. The Red Robe Priests in the castle can now trigger nearby Ganados to go into their Plaga forms, as well as disorient Leon for a brief period. You want to make them your top priority when you see them in a room. The Plaga Spiders will now jump onto nearby Ganados and make them go berserk. They'll chase after you a lot faster than normal Ganados. Besides reworking old enemies, the remake also includes new enemy types. Killing a Ganado will sometimes cause them to revive in a frenzy state. Their necks are clearly broken, but they'll move about as fast as they would if a Plaga Spider was controlling them. There's a ganado that's bigger than the others and wears a bull's head. In the village, he'll either carry a large hammer to swing at you, or try to kick you and run you down with clotheslines. In the island, he replaces JJ and uses a wrist-mounted chain gun instead of a minigun. Stronger than regular enemies, but can't take as many hits as a Salvador. The Novistadors have a more believable version of camouflage that totally works. By the time you realize what you're looking at, they've already pounced on you. Good thing you can parry some of their attacks. The deadliest change the remake brings is that regenerators can now jog towards Leon. It's terrifying if you're not ready for it. The shooting gallery returns, and I like how each challenge is designed to train you on the nuances of different weapons. Punisher drills teach you how to manage penetrating shots. Bolt thrower drills teach you when to switch to explosive mines. And shotgun drills teach you how to use the spread of the shells to take out groups of targets. You get rewarded with tokens you can exchange at gacha machines to get charms to add to your attaché case. These charms provide passive buffs on the amount of ammo you get from crafting, or bonuses to selling items at the merchant. I don't like how the gacha charms can give you dupes, but they're not really the replacement for the bottle cap figures from Classic. Instead, you get points from completing challenges during the campaign, and use those to unlock extra weapons, skins, accessories, 3D models, and concept art. It's a carryover from RE3's bonus content. I know it got mocked online, but the yellow paint to indicate important stuff like barrels and switches isn't that bad in practice. There's a chase sequence that caused me to panic, and I didn't know where the game wanted me to go until I saw a wall with that yellow paint. Saved me from a sudden game over. I like how much thought Capcom put into making these changes to RE4. It's already pretty ballsy of them to even try to remake the game, but they really impressed me with how they remixed rooms and encounters. After the cabin fight, RE4 Classic gave Leon the option of either fighting a Gigante or the Bella Sisters. In the remake, Leon only fights the Bellas. I thought they'd removed that Gigante, but he's actually been relocated to the castle. There's a set piece where it's standing on top of the castle walls and hucking rocks at Leon. You have to make your way towards a cannon to shoot the Gigante while avoiding its attacks. I can't help but think this was a reference to the giant in Sen's Fortress in Dark Souls. One of the more impressive areas for me in the castle section was a locked door with a Chimera relief. In Classic, you moved in a linear sequence from room to room, collecting the missing heads and double back to the locked door with the relief to progress. In the remake, the Chimera statue is placed in a hallway that serves as a hub, where the connecting rooms each contain a piece of the statue. One of the rooms is a dining hall, but it's been repurposed to be a puzzle room that incorporates the king and queen imagery from the chalices in Classic. Earlier in the campaign, the lake becomes its own hub after you beat Del Lago, where you can return to earlier parts of the area and retrieve treasures you couldn't get at the beginning. I won't go into detail about every little change because we'd be here all day. I do want to point out though that some changes feel like they were meant to keep returning players on their toes. The cabin fight isn't bad, but I don't like the layout in the remake because the upper level feels too claustrophobic. This set piece also serves as an excuse to bring back the wooden planks from RE2 to block off windows and stem the flow of zombies. RE4 is a slow walking segment that returns from RE2 and 3. Instead of being used to mask the game loading in level geometry, these bits actually serve a narrative purpose in the remakes. They always follow a really tough fight or a hectic chase sequence to release the tension for the player. I criticized RE3 before because it would show Jill walking as if she were injured, despite her health status being green. But I think it works for RE4, given the premise that Leon is being attacked by a parasite. So even if his vitals appear normal, his body is still freaking out. It also gives the game license to get creative with the imagery.
Give me a break.
I'm surprised with how much carried over from Classic, especially when it comes to boss fights. I think there was only one boss that I don't remember making a return, but they might appear in another update, so we'll hold off on saying who it is for now. The bosses that have returned have retained their distinguishing features. One of them is a whole new trick up their sleeve, but they're fundamentally the same encounter as in Classic. The one character who really benefited from the remake is Krauser. Not only is a knife fight QTE Bonanza from Classic now a proper boss fight, it takes advantage of the new parry ability. Your actions as the player feel consistent with what Leon is doing on screen, since you've already made the mental connection that pressing the knife buttons will trigger a parry if you time it right against Krauser. It reminded me of the Liquid Ocelot fight at the end of MGS4, but without having to learn an ad hoc control scheme on the fly. Also, Krauser's backstory gets fleshed out and hinted at in the opening montage, so he doesn't feel like a new character who suddenly has history with Leon, like he did in Classic. Sadly, Sadler and Salazar don't get the same love. In fact, their interactions with Leon have been pared down in the remake, so they retain an air of mystery and menace, instead of the cartoon villain banter that exchanged with Leon.
Your right hand comes off?
Say whatever you please. Die, you worm!
Don't get me wrong, they still have that flair, but it's not as prevalent. As far as the writing goes, it doesn't ham it up like RE4 Classic, but it mostly keeps the essence of each character's personality intact. Some got rewritten to have fundamentally different motivations than before, but at their core, they still follow the same archetypes. Also, they've gotten really good at just barely breaking past the fourth wall with some of the references.
I'm pretty much a master of unlocking.
Ride's here. You coming?
I think we both know this is where we go our separate ways.
Luis gets more screen time and brings a whole dude's rock energy when he's with Leon. He's actually pretty useful during combat, because he'll shoot enemies who have you in a bind, or do his own follow-up attacks if you stun an enemy near him. I got a feeling he'll be the model Capcom uses for AI buddies in future titles. Ada and Ashley have a lot of moments to shine in the story. I like how Ashley comes off in her performance as vulnerable, but not helpless. It's a fine line to walk to write a character not used to stressful environments, without coming off as fake when she gets empowering moments. But Capcom made it work. Ada's new VA hasn't been warmly received, and she ended up deleting her Instagram due to harassment. The drama seems to have died down now, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I didn't have an issue with her performance. I was more taken aback because I could tell that Ada had a different VA from RE2, but Leon's VA returned. One of the bigger casualties in the writing is the dynamic between Leon and Hunnigan. There's not much in their exchanges besides reminding the player what to do next. I didn't expect Leon to make HR-worthy comments to Hunnigan, but at least some friendly banter would have been nice to see. I was going to put this video up earlier, but the Mercenaries update dropped, and I had to put some time into that. This is where the changes might actually put off some returning players. First, only 3 of the 4 stages have returned. The village, the castle, and the island are back, but Waterworld is missing. Second, Ada and Wesker are missing. Leon, Krauser, and Hunk return, and Luis makes his debut in this game. From what I've seen on Twitter, Capcom is going to release separate ways in another update, and that'll come with Ada, Wesker, and Leon in his gangster suit. I assume this means he'll have a different loadout than regular Leon. There's also that issue with microtransactions that let you bypass upgrading weapons with real money. Capcom's done stuff like this before with Devil May Cry 5, giving out bundles of red orbs to expedite progression. I understand the concerns of providing a way to opt out of playing the game, but I personally didn't have an issue with them because they don't affect game balance. I could see the argument where this may not be so bad now, but the next time they do it, they'll take more away from the player. But we'll just have to wait and see what Capcom does in response to the backlash. Besides those big changes, Mercs is more or less how I remember it from Classic. Pick a stage, pick a character, and start blasting. Collect time nodes to increase your time limit, and rack up kills to increase your score. Every now and then, special Ganados appear in the field to add some extra challenge, and killing them nets bigger rewards. Something new they've added is that each character has a devil trigger called Mayhem Mode. Racking up kills fills up the Mayhem meter, which you can activate when it's full by pressing in both sticks. Each character has their own unique Mayhem ability. Leon gets a speed and damage boost, and he can one-shot early game Ganados if you aim for the head. Luis can place TNT like traps to get multi-kills. Krauser retains his ability to go into his Plaga form, and his attacks usually one-shot every enemy. He also has a Stinger attack, it's literally called that in the game, that he can perform by pulling both triggers. The objectively best Mayhem mode goes to the objectively best girl, Hunk. Not only can he still neckbreak special Ganados like nobody's business, but his Mayhem mode gives him infinite ammo, which makes him the deadliest thing on 2 legs in the game. If that weren't cool enough, getting S+ on all the stages with a single character unlocks a hand cannon, which up until now could only be unlocked if you get an A rank in the campaign on Professional, the hardest difficulty. Clearing Mercs is definitely the easier method. I think that's all I want to say about RE4's remake. It lives up to the legacy of its predecessor, and its changes are mostly hits with a few misses. Do I think it serves as a replacement for RE4 Classic? No. If you're new to the series and have only played the remakes up until now, There's nothing wrong with playing this game, but although I appreciate the improvements this remake brings to RE4, I don't think they were outright necessary. RE4's combat was built around its camera and mobility. I could fire it up right now and still hold my own in the village fight. Anyone who says RE4 feels antiquated should not be on Twitter, because you have to be older than 13 to have an account there. All that missing content I kept mentioning, that alone justifies why you should go back to the classic, and why you should check out the remake to see how they remix the rooms and encounters. RE4's remake is important because it's going to be the roadmap for how Capcom will take the series. Everyone's already clamoring for RE5 and 6 to get the same treatment, but I'd rather Capcom take these lessons and apply them to Code Veronica and RE0. Claire and Rebecca should get their respective times to shine, and I think it's more interesting when Capcom has to take a game that came from the classic era and retrofit it into the remake model. I don't look at the remake as saying, finally, Resident Evil 4 is good now, but more as a two-knife situation. It don't get any better than this, fellas.
This time, it can be different.